as Tony walked out of the speakeasy. He knew that his mastery of language patterns in hypnotic negotiation had once again secured his dominance in the mob world. His adversaries feared him, and his allies revered him. With a satisfied grin, Tony ventured into the night, ready for his next negotiation challenge, armed with his formidable arsenal of language patterns. Discussing the power of direct suggestions and how to use them effectively. The power of direct suggestions cannot be underestimated in the realm of negotiation. When used effectively, direct suggestions can be a potent tool in influencing others and achieving desired outcomes. In this section, we will delve into the intricacies of direct suggestions and explore how to use them effectively in negotiation contexts. Direct suggestions are straightforward, explicit statements or commands that leave little room for interpretation. They are assertive and authoritative, aimed at influencing others' thoughts, emotions, or behaviors. Direct suggestions can be verbal or non-verbal, and they can be delivered in various ways, such as through tone of voice, body language, or written communication. One key aspect of using direct suggestions effectively is to establish rapport with the other party. Rapport is built on trust, respect, and understanding. By creating a positive connection and establishing rapport, you can increase the receptivity of the other party to your direct suggestions. Another essential element in using direct suggestions effectively is clarity. Your suggestions should be clear and concise, leaving no room for ambiguity. Ambiguous or vague suggestions may not be understood or may be interpreted differently, leading to misunderstandings and miscommunications. Ensure that your suggestions are specific, focused, and aligned with your negotiation objectives. Confidence and conviction are also crucial when delivering direct suggestions. Your tone of voice, body language, and overall demeanor should exude confidence and authority. Confidence can instill trust and credibility in your suggestions, making them more persuasive and influential. Timing is another critical factor in using direct suggestions effectively. The timing of your suggestions can greatly impact their success. Consider the context of the negotiation and the emotional state of the other party. Deliver your suggestions at the appropriate moment when the other party is receptive and open to influence. It's also essential to be mindful of the language you use in your direct suggestions. Use positive and affirmative language, avoiding negative or confrontational language that may trigger resistance or defensiveness. Frame your suggestions in a way that highlights the benefits or advantages of complying with them. In addition, it's important to be aware of the other party's response to your direct suggestions. Pay attention to their verbal and non-verbal cues to gauge their receptivity and adjust your approach accordingly. If you encounter resistance or pushback, be prepared to adapt and rephrase your suggestions or explore alternative solutions. Finally, it's crucial to use direct suggestions ethically and responsibly. Manipulating or coercing others through direct suggestions is unethical and can harm relationships and trust. Always strive for win-win outcomes in negotiation, where both parties feel satisfied and respected. In conclusion, direct suggestions are a powerful tool in negotiation, but they require skillful and ethical use. Establishing rapport, clarity, confidence, timing, language, and responsiveness to the other party's cues are key elements in using direct suggestions effectively. By mastering the art of delivering direct suggestions, you can enhance your negotiation skills and achieve successful outcomes in various negotiation contexts. Title: The Power Play. It was the height of the Prohibition era in the 1920s, and the city was under the grip of notorious mobsters. Among them, Johnny the Shark Russo was a feared and respected figure. He ran the illegal liquor trade in the city, commanding respect and fear from all who crossed his path. On the other side of the law was Detective Mike O'Connor, a dedicated and relentless officer determined to bring down the mob and restore law and order. O'Connor had been chasing Russo for years, but the slippery mobster always seemed to be one step ahead, evading capture. One day, O'Connor received a tip that Russo was hosting a secret meeting in a speakeasy downtown. Determined to finally catch his arch-nemesis, O'Connor gathered his team and raided the speakeasy. Russo's men put up a fierce fight, but O'Connor's team managed to arrest Russo and bring him in for questioning. At the police station, O'Connor interrogated Russo, trying to gather information on his criminal activities and bring him to justice. Russo, known for his charismatic and persuasive demeanor, remained cool and composed, refusing to divulge any information. Frustrated, O'Connor decided to employ the power of direct suggestions. He used a confident and assertive tone, looking Russo straight in the eye, and delivered clear and concise suggestions aimed at influencing him to reveal the truth. O'Connor used affirmative language, highlighting the benefits of cooperating and the potential consequences of resisting. Russo initially resisted O'Connor's suggestions, but the detective persisted, using various techniques such as repetition, pacing and leading. and embedded commands. O'Connor carefully observed Russo's responses and adjusted his approach accordingly, adapting to Russo's cues and keeping his confidence unwavering. As the interrogation continued, O'Connor's direct suggestions began to chip away at Russo's defenses. Despite Russo's best efforts to resist, he found himself feeling increasingly compelled to comply with O'Connor's suggestions. O'Connor's skillful use of direct suggestions was slowly breaking through Russo's tough exterior. After hours of intense negotiation, Russo finally broke, revealing crucial information about his illegal operations and implicating his associates. O'Connor had successfully used the power of direct suggestions to extract the truth from Russo, leading to the dismantling of Russo's criminal empire and his eventual arrest. Reflecting on the interrogation, O'Connor realized the importance of using direct suggestions effectively in negotiation contexts. He understood that establishing rapport, clarity, confidence, timing, language, and responsiveness to the other party's cues were critical in influencing others and achieving desired outcomes. In the end, O'Connor's relentless pursuit of justice and his adept use of direct suggestions had prevailed. Russo, once a formidable antagonist, had succumbed to the power of direct suggestions, proving that with skillful negotiation techniques, even the toughest opponents could be swayed. Exploring the subtlety of indirect suggestions and their impact on influencing counterparts' behavior. Title: The Art of Influence. The subtlety of indirect suggestions in negotiation. Language can be a powerful tool, and skilled negotiators understand the art of using words to influence others. One technique that is often employed is the use of indirect suggestions, which can have a subtle yet significant impact on influencing counterparts' behavior. Indirect suggestions are a form of language pattern that are subtly embedded in statements or questions, without being overtly directive. They work by bypassing the conscious mind and appealing to the subconscious, influencing behavior at a deeper level. Skilled negotiators understand the nuances of indirect suggestions and how they can be used strategically to achieve desired outcomes. One example of indirect suggestions in negotiation is the use of metaphors. Metaphors are a powerful way to convey messages indirectly, as they create images and associations that can influence how people perceive and interpret information. For instance, a negotiator might use a metaphor such as planting the seeds of success to subtly suggest taking small steps towards a desired outcome without directly commanding or instructing the other party. Another example of indirect suggestions is the use of presuppositions. Presuppositions are statements that assume the truth of a certain proposition without explicitly stating it. For example, a negotiator might say, "When we reach an agreement," instead of "if we reach an agreement." This subtle shift in language presupposes that an agreement will be reached, subtly influencing the counterpart's behavior towards a positive outcome. Pacing and leading is another effective technique that uses indirect suggestions. Pacing involves aligning with the other party's perspective or behavior, while leading involves subtly guiding them towards the desired outcome. For example, a negotiator might say, "I understand that you have concerns about the price, and I want to make sure you feel comfortable with the investment. Let's explore some options together." By pacing the other party's concerns and then leading them towards exploring options, the negotiator is subtly influencing their behavior without being directive. The subtlety of indirect suggestions lies in their ability to influence behavior without being overt or pushy. They tap into the subconscious mind, which is more receptive to suggestion, and can create a sense of agreement or alignment with the other party without using direct commands or instructions. However, it requires skill and finesse to use indirect suggestions effectively in negotiation, as they must be carefully crafted and tailored to the specific context and individual counterparts. In conclusion, the use of indirect suggestions in negotiation can be a powerful tool for skilled negotiators. It allows them to influence counterparts' behavior subtly, without being overt or pushy. Metaphors, presuppositions, pacing and leading, and other indirect language patterns can be strategically employed to create a sense of agreement, alignment, and influence in negotiation contexts. Understanding the subtlety of indirect suggestions and mastering their use can greatly enhance a negotiator's ability to achieve desired outcomes and build rapport with counterparts. Title: The Whisperer's Gambit, a 1920s mobster story of subtle influence in the bustling streets of New York City during the roaring 1920s. Mobsters ruled the underworld with their illicit activities and cunning negotiations. Among them was Vincent the Whisperer Caruso, known for his smooth talking and subtle persuasion techniques that made him a formidable negotiator. Vincent was a respected figure in the mob, known for his calculated moves and strategic thinking. His latest rival was Tony the Bulldog Rossi, a hot-headed mobster who wanted to expand his territory into Vincent's territory. As the tensions between them escalated, they decided to meet and negotiate to avoid an all-out war. The meeting took place in a dimly lit speakeasy, with Vincent and Tony seated at a private booth. Vincent was known for his silver tongue and ability to influence others subtly, and he intended to use his skills to his advantage. Throughout the negotiation, Vincent employed various subtle language patterns, including indirect suggestions, to influence Tony's behavior without being overt or pushy. He used metaphors to paint vivid images in Tony's mind, such as describing the proposed territory as a gold mine waiting to be tapped and suggesting that they could dig together and strike it rich. Vincent also used presuppositions to assume the truth of certain propositions without explicitly stating them. He said things like, "When we come to an agreement, and once we settle this matter," subtly implying that an agreement was inevitable and reinforcing the idea in Tony's mind. Furthermore, Vincent employed pacing and leading techniques to align with Tony's perspective and then guide him towards the desired outcome. He acknowledged Tony's desire to expand his territory and gain more power, but then led him towards considering alternative options, such as partnering with Vincent instead of engaging in a turf war. As the negotiation progressed, Vincent noticed that Tony's demeanor changed. He became more receptive to Vincent's suggestions, and his initial hostility seemed to dissipate. Vincent's subtle influence was working, and he could see the power of indirect suggestions in action. In the end, Vincent's strategic use of subtle language patterns paid off. He and Tony reached a mutually beneficial agreement, avoiding a violent confrontation and ensuring both of their interests were met. Tony walked away from the negotiation with a newfound respect for Vincent's negotiation skills and a sense of satisfaction in the outcome. Vincent's reputation as the whisperer grew stronger, and he continued to wield his subtle influence in future negotiations, solidifying his position as a respected and feared mobster in the 1920s underworld. In conclusion, the story of Vincent the Whisperer Caruso illustrates the impact of exploring the subtlety of indirect suggestions in influencing counterparts' behavior in a negotiation context. Vincent's strategic use of metaphors, presuppositions, pacing and leading, and other subtle language patterns helped him navigate a challenging negotiation and achieve his desired outcome. It highlights the power of language in negotiation and the importance of mastering the art of subtle influence in achieving success in any negotiation scenario. Chapter 4. Creating Anchors for Influence in the World of Negotiation. The ability to influence and persuade others is a crucial skill. One powerful tool in a negotiator's arsenal is the concept of anchoring, which involves setting reference points that influence the perceptions and behaviors of counterparts. Anchors can be created through various means, including verbal and nonverbal cues, and they can significantly impact the outcome of a negotiation. In this chapter, we will delve into the art of creating anchors for influence in negotiation contexts. We will explore the different types of anchors, their psychological underpinnings, and how they can be effectively used to shape perceptions, expectations, and decisions. We will also discuss practical examples and case studies that illustrate the impact of anchors in negotiations, and provide techniques and strategies for creating and leveraging anchors to achieve desired outcomes. Whether you are a seasoned negotiator looking to refine your skills or a novice seeking to understand the power of anchors in influencing others, this chapter will provide valuable insights and practical tools to enhance your negotiation prowess. Get ready to discover the art of creating anchors for influence and unlock new possibilities in your negotiations. Discussing the concept of anchoring and its role in hypnotic negotiation. Anchoring is a psychological phenomenon that plays a significant role in influencing human behavior, including in the context of hypnotic negotiation. Anchors are reference points or cues that are used to shape the perceptions, expectations, and decisions of others. They can be created through various means, such as verbal suggestions, nonverbal cues, or environmental factors, and they can be powerful tools for negotiators to exert influence over their counterparts. In hypnotic negotiation, anchors can be strategically used to guide the direction of the negotiation and shape the responses and behaviors of the other party. By creating anchors, a skilled negotiator can influence the counterpart's thoughts, feelings, and actions, and ultimately achieve the desired outcome. One key aspect of anchoring in hypnotic negotiation is the establishment of positive associations with certain cues or stimuli. For example, a negotiator may use embedded commands or metaphors to subtly suggest certain behaviors or decisions to the counterpart, creating anchors that evoke positive responses. These anchors can be reinforced through repetition, consistency, and congruence with the overall negotiation strategy, thereby increasing their impact on the counterpart's mindset and behavior. Another important element of anchoring in hypnotic negotiation is the ability to create and leverage emotional anchors. Emotions are powerful drivers of human behavior, and skilled negotiators can use emotional anchors to influence the counterpart's emotional state during the negotiation. For instance, a negotiator may use pacing and leading techniques to match the counterpart's emotional state, and then gradually shift it towards a more favorable emotional state. creating anchors associated with positive emotions that can influence the counterpart's decision-making process. Furthermore, anchors can also be used to shape perceptions of value and pricing in negotiation. For instance, a negotiator may use an initial high anchor, such as a high price or an inflated value, to set a reference point that influences the counterpart's perception of what is reasonable or acceptable. This can lead to favorable outcomes in terms of pricing, concessions, or other negotiation terms. It's important to note that anchoring in hypnotic negotiation should be used ethically and responsibly, with a focus on building rapport, establishing trust, and creating mutually beneficial outcomes. Misuse of anchors can result in loss of trust and damage the negotiation relationship, which may have long-term consequences. In conclusion, the concept of anchoring plays a crucial role in hypnotic negotiation. It involves the strategic use of cues or stimuli to shape the counterpart's perceptions, expectations, and decisions, and can be a powerful tool for negotiators to influence and guide the negotiation process. By understanding the psychology behind anchoring and applying it effectively in negotiation contexts, negotiators can enhance their persuasive skills and achieve favorable outcomes. Title: The Anchor's Gambit. It was the roaring 1920s, and the city was buzzing with illegal activities. The Prohibition era was in full swing, and mobsters ruled the streets with their bootlegging operations. Among them, two notorious figures stood out: Tony the Ace D'Angelo, a seasoned mobster with a sharp mind, and Johnny the Joker Malone, a cunning and conniving antagonist who always had a trick up his sleeve. Tony was known for his smooth negotiation skills, often employing hypnotic techniques to influence his rivals and secure profitable deals. He understood the power of anchoring and used it to his advantage. He had a reputation for creating anchors that would guide his counterparts towards his desired outcomes. One day, Tony received a lucrative offer from a rival gang to join forces and expand their bootlegging operations. Sensing an opportunity, Tony agreed to meet with Johnny, the leader of the rival gang, at a speakeasy downtown. As Tony walked into the dimly lit speakeasy, he spotted Johnny sitting at a corner table, grinning slyly. Tony knew he had to be cautious, as Johnny was notorious for his deceitful ways. But he was confident in his negotiation skills and was determined to strike a deal. Tony sat down, and the negotiations began. Johnny started with a direct suggestion, throwing a high anchor by stating an exorbitant price for their proposed partnership. Tony was prepared for this and countered with an indirect suggestion, subtly shifting the conversation towards the potential benefits of the partnership and creating positive emotional anchors associated with the success of the venture. Johnny, being the antagonist that he was, tried to disrupt Tony's anchors with snide remarks and attempts to belittle Tony's reputation. But Tony remained calm and composed, using his skills to re-anchor the conversation and steer it back towards a favorable outcome. As the negotiation continued, Tony employed various language patterns to pace and lead Johnny's emotions, gradually shifting his emotional state towards excitement and eagerness for the partnership. He used metaphors and embedded commands to subtly plant suggestions in Johnny's mind, creating anchors that would influence his decision-making process. As the night went on, Tony and Johnny continued their intense negotiation. Tony was skillfully navigating the conversation, using anchors to his advantage, while Johnny grew increasingly frustrated and agitated. However, Tony's persistence and mastery of hypnotic negotiation techniques were paying off. Finally, after hours of back and forth, Tony sealed the deal. Johnny reluctantly agreed to the partnership on Tony's terms, swayed by the anchors Tony had created and the positive emotions associated with the successful outcome. Tony left the speakeasy with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that he had once again used the power of anchoring to his advantage. In the following weeks, the partnership between Tony and Johnny's gang proved to be successful, with profits soaring and their influence growing. Despite their differences, Tony and Johnny continued their business dealings, with Tony always staying one step ahead, using anchors to maintain his edge in negotiations. In the end, Tony's mastery of hypnotic negotiation techniques and his understanding of the power of anchoring allowed him to outwit and outmaneuver his antagonist, Johnny. Tony's reputation as a skilled negotiator grew, and he became a force to be reckoned with in the mobster world. As for Johnny, he learned the hard way that underestimating Tony's hypnotic negotiation skills and the power of anchors could have dire consequences. Spending time with him might have been rewarding for Johnny in terms of profits, but he always left their negotiations feeling outsmarted and frustrated. In conclusion, the concept of anchoring played a crucial role in Tony's negotiations with Johnny, illustrating the power of language patterns, providing practical guidance on creating and utilizing anchors to influence counterparts' emotions and responses. Anchoring is a powerful psychological technique used in negotiation and influence to guide and shape the emotions and responses of counterparts. Anchors are created by associating a particular stimulus, such as a word, phrase, or visual cue, with a specific emotional state or response. Once established, these anchors can be used strategically to influence counterparts' behavior and achieve desired outcomes. Creating anchors. To create effective anchors, it's important to understand the emotions and responses you want to evoke in your counterparts. This requires careful observation and understanding of their behaviors, motivations, and preferences. Here are some practical guidance on creating and utilizing anchors to influence counterparts' emotions and responses. 1. Identify emotional states. Start by identifying the emotional states that are relevant to the negotiation or influence situation. For example, you may want to anchor positive emotions such as excitement, enthusiasm, or trust, or negative emotions such as fear, uncertainty, or doubt. Understanding the emotional landscape of the negotiation will help you create anchors that align with your objectives. 2. Choose relevant stimuli. Once you have identified the emotional states you want to anchor, choose relevant stimuli that can be associated with those emotions. These stimuli can be words, phrases, images, gestures, or even physical objects. For example, if you want to anchor trust, you can use words like reliable, credible, or dependable, or gestures like a firm handshake or maintaining eye contact. 3. Timing and repetition. Timing and repetition are crucial in creating anchors. The anchor should be introduced at the right moment to have maximum impact. For example, if you want to anchor excitement, you can introduce the anchor at the beginning of the negotiation when setting the tone for the discussion. Repetition of the anchor reinforces its association with the desired emotion or response. Utilizing anchors. Once the anchors are created, they can be used strategically during the negotiation or influence process to guide and shape counterparts' emotions and responses. Here are some practical ways to utilize anchors effectively. 1. Language and framing. Use the anchored stimuli in your language and framing of the negotiation. For example, use words and phrases that are associated with the desired emotion or response. If you have anchored trust, use words like trustworthy, honest, or credible when describing your proposals or arguments. 2. Nonverbal cues. Utilize nonverbal cues to reinforce the anchors. For example, use gestures, facial expressions, or body language that are congruent with the anchored emotion. This can create a subtle but powerful influence on counterparts' emotions and responses. 3. Contextual cues. Utilize contextual cues to activate the anchors. For example, refer back to previous positive experiences or successes that are associated with the anchored emotion. This can evoke the emotional state and influence counterparts' responses. 4. Flexibility and adaptability. Be flexible and adaptable in utilizing anchors. Different counterparts may respond differently to different anchors, so it's important to pay attention to their reactions and adjust your approach accordingly. Experiment with different anchors and observe the results to refine your strategy. In conclusion, creating and utilizing anchors can be a powerful tool in negotiation and influence. By strategically associating specific stimuli with desired emotions or responses, anchors can guide and shape counterparts' behavior in a subtle yet impactful way. Understanding the emotional landscape of the negotiation, choosing relevant stimuli, timing and repetition, and using language, nonverbal cues, contextual cues, and being flexible and adaptable are key factors in effectively utilizing anchors in influencing counterparts' emotions and responses. In the bustling city of Chicago during the 1920s, mobsters ruled the streets with their illicit activities and fierce rivalries. One of the most notorious mob bosses in town was Vincent "Vinnie" Malone, known for his cunning negotiation skills and ability to influence others to bend to his will. Vinnie had a trusted lieutenant, Tony, who was fiercely loyal and always by his side. However, Tony was also known for his hot temper and impulsive nature, which often landed him in trouble. Vinnie recognized that Tony's unpredictable behavior could sometimes jeopardize their negotiations with rival gangs and law enforcement, so he decided to teach Tony the art of creating and utilizing anchors to influence counterparts' emotions and responses. Vinnie took Tony under his wing and provided him with practical guidance on how to create and utilize anchors effectively. He explained to Tony that anchors could be powerful tools to shape the emotional state and responses of their counterparts, giving them an advantage in negotiations. First, Vinnie taught Tony the importance of identifying the emotional states that were relevant to their negotiation objectives. He explained that by understanding the emotional landscape of the negotiation, they could create anchors that aligned with their goals. For example, if they wanted to evoke fear or intimidation, they could anchor it with specific words or phrases like consequences, repercussions, or serious repercussions. Next, Vinny showed Tony how to choose relevant stimuli that could be associated with the desired emotions. They could use words, phrases, gestures, or even physical objects as anchors. For instance, if they wanted to anchor trust, they could use words like loyalty, honor, or integrity, or gestures like a nod, a handshake, or a pat on the back. Vinny also emphasized the importance of timing and repetition in creating effective anchors. He explained that the anchor should be introduced at the right moment to have maximum impact. For example, they could introduce the anchor of fear during a tense moment in a negotiation to reinforce their position. Once the anchors were established, Vinny showed Tony how to utilize them strategically during negotiations. They would use the anchored stimuli in their language and framing of the negotiation. For instance, they would use words associated with fear or intimidation when making demands or issuing warnings. They would also utilize nonverbal cues like stern facial expressions or aggressive body language to reinforce the anchors. Vinny and Tony would also use contextual cues to activate the anchors. They would refer back to previous incidents where their rivals had faced the consequences of crossing them, reinforcing the anchored emotion of fear. This would evoke a sense of caution and compliance in their counterparts, influencing their responses in their favor. As Tony practiced and honed his skills in creating and utilizing anchors, he became more effective in negotiations. He could see the impact of anchors on his counterparts' emotions and responses, giving him an upper hand in their dealings. He learned to be flexible and adaptable, experimenting with different anchors and adjusting his approach based on the reactions of his counterparts. In time, Tony became known for his negotiating prowess, and Vinny was proud of his copyright copyright. Together, they continued to dominate the mob scene in Chicago, using the power of anchors to their advantage and always staying one step ahead of their rivals. In conclusion, practical guidance on creating and utilizing anchors to influence counterparts' emotions and responses proved to be a valuable tool for Vinny and Tony in their mobster negotiations. By understanding the emotional landscape of their negotiations, choosing relevant stimuli, timing and repetition, and using language, nonverbal cues, and contextual cues strategically, they were able to shape their counterparts' behavior and achieve their goals in the dangerous world of 1920s mobsters. Chapter 5, Overcoming Resistance and Objections in Any Negotiation. Resistance and objections from counterparts are inevitable, whether it's pushback on pricing, concerns about terms, or objections to proposed solutions. Negotiators must be prepared to face resistance and objections head-on. Overcoming these obstacles requires skillful techniques and strategies to navigate through the challenges and find common ground. In this chapter, we will explore the art of overcoming resistance and objections in negotiation. We will delve into the psychology behind resistance and objections, understanding the underlying reasons and motivations behind them. We will also discuss practical approaches and tactics that can be used to address and overcome resistance and objections effectively. Negotiators will learn how to identify different types of resistance and objections, from emotional and psychological barriers to tactical maneuvers by counterparts. We will explore how to respond to objections with diplomacy and assertiveness, maintaining a collaborative tone while addressing the concerns of both parties. Additionally, we will discuss how to leverage effective communication, active listening, and persuasive techniques to overcome resistance and objections and move the negotiation forward. With the guidance provided in this chapter, negotiators will be equipped with the tools to handle resistance and objections with confidence and professionalism. They will learn how to navigate through challenging situations, build trust, and find mutually beneficial solutions that meet the needs of all parties involved. So, let's dive into the art of overcoming resistance and objections in negotiation and master the skills to achieve successful outcomes. Addressing the challenges of resistance and objections in negotiation. Addressing the challenges of resistance and objections in negotiation requires understanding the root causes of these challenges and developing effective strategies to overcome them. Here are some key points to consider. 1. Psychological barriers. Resistance and objections often stem from psychological barriers, such as fear, distrust, or uncertainty. These challenges may be rooted in past experiences, personal biases, or concerns about the negotiation outcome. Addressing psychological barriers requires empathetic listening and understanding the emotions and concerns of the counterparts. By acknowledging their concerns and demonstrating empathy, negotiators can create a safe environment for open communication and build trust. 2. Differing interests. Resistance and objections may arise when parties have conflicting interests or priorities. In such cases, it's important to identify and understand the underlying interests of each party. By focusing on interests rather than positions, negotiators can explore creative solutions that meet the needs of all parties involved. This may involve brainstorming options, finding common ground, and exploring win-win scenarios. 3. Tactical maneuvers. Counterparts may use tactical maneuvers to gain leverage or create obstacles in the negotiation process. These may include bluffing, stalling, or making unrealistic demands. Dealing with tactical maneuvers requires being vigilant and maintaining a strategic approach. It's important to not fall into traps or react impulsively, but rather to respond with a level-headed and calculated approach. 4. Effective communication. Clear and effective communication is crucial in addressing resistance and objections. It's important to articulate thoughts and ideas clearly, listen actively to the concerns of the counterparts, and ask open-ended questions to gather more information. By promoting open and transparent communication, negotiators can build rapport, establish credibility, and facilitate a constructive negotiation environment. 5. Flexibility and adaptability. Overcoming resistance and objections may require flexibility and adaptability in the negotiation approach. It's important to be willing to adjust strategies, consider alternatives, and explore creative solutions. Rigidity or sticking to preconceived notions may hinder progress and create more resistance. Being adaptable and willing to find common ground can help in overcoming challenges and moving the negotiation forward. 6. Win-win mindset. Adopting a win-win mindset is crucial in addressing resistance and objections. Rather than focusing on a win-lose outcome, negotiators should strive for mutually beneficial solutions. This requires a collaborative approach, seeking to understand the needs and interests of all parties involved, and finding solutions that meet those needs. A win-win mindset fosters cooperation, builds trust, and increases the chances of successful negotiation outcomes. In conclusion, addressing the challenges of resistance and objections in negotiation requires a combination of emotional intelligence, effective communication, strategic thinking, and a win-win mindset. By understanding the underlying causes of resistance and objections and employing appropriate strategies, negotiators can navigate through these challenges and achieve positive outcomes in their negotiations. It was the roaring 1920s, and the city was buzzing with the illegal activities of mobsters and gangsters. In a smoky back room of a speakeasy, two notorious figures sat across from each other, ready to negotiate a business deal. Tony the Shark Santora, a feared mob boss known for his ruthless demeanor, was the protagonist in this story. On the other side of the table sat Lana the Enchantress Monroe, a cunning and mysterious femme fatale who was notorious for her charm and manipulation. She was the antagonist in this tale, always wanting the opposite of what Tony desired. Tony had his eyes set on taking control of the bootlegging operations in the city, and he needed Lana's connections to make it happen. However, Lana was not easily convinced. She raised objections and resistance at every turn, throwing Tony off his game. She challenged his proposed terms, questioned his motives, and tried to plant seeds of doubt in his mind. Tony found himself in uncharted territory, facing an adversary who was as skilled in negotiation tactics as he was. Tony tried to use his usual aggressive approach, but Lana remained calm and collected. She employed subtle indirect suggestions, anchoring techniques, and tactical maneuvers to throw Tony off balance. She knew how to push his buttons and trigger emotional responses, making it challenging for Tony to stay focused and composed. Her win-win mindset was nowhere to be found, as she was determined to get the upper hand at all costs. As the negotiations progressed, Tony realized that his usual tactics were not effective against Lana's resistance and objections. He had to think on his feet, adapt his approach, and find common ground. He learned to listen actively to Lana's concerns, ask open-ended questions to understand her interests, and look for creative solutions that could benefit both parties. He had to keep his emotions in check and not fall into Lana's traps. Despite the challenges, Tony found himself intrigued by Lana's negotiation skills. Spending time with her was always rewarding in an unexpected way. He admired her cunningness and ability to stay composed under pressure. He realized that she was a worthy adversary, and he needed to approach the negotiation with a strategic mindset rather than brute force. In the end, after several rounds of intense negotiation, Tony and Lana reached a mutually beneficial agreement. They found a win-win solution that satisfied both parties' interests. Tony gained the connections he needed for his bootlegging operations, and Lana secured a favorable deal for herself as well. They parted ways with a grudging respect for each other's negotiation skills, knowing that they might cross paths again in the future. This story highlights the challenges of addressing resistance and objections in negotiation and the need for adaptability, effective communication, and a win-win mindset. It also showcases how spending time with an antagonist who is skilled in negotiation can be rewarding, as it presents an opportunity to learn and grow as a negotiator. In the world of mobsters and gangsters, negotiation skills were just as crucial as any other weapon in the arsenal. and Tony learned that the hard way in his encounter with Lana the Enchantress Monroe. Discussing how hypnotic language can be used to handle and overcome resistance. Hypnotic language, also known as conversational hypnosis or covert hypnosis, is a powerful tool that can be used to influence and persuade others in various settings, including negotiation. When it comes to handling and overcoming resistance in negotiation, the strategic use of hypnotic language can be highly effective in navigating through barriers and reaching mutually beneficial agreements. Resistance in negotiation can come in various forms, such as objections, pushback, skepticism, or disagreement from the other party. It may arise due to differences in interests, values, or perspectives, or it may be a tactic employed by the other party to gain leverage or protect their position. Regardless of the cause, resistance can pose challenges and create roadblocks in the negotiation process. Hypnotic language techniques can be employed to address and overcome resistance in negotiation in several ways. 1. Building rapport. Building rapport is a crucial step in negotiation, as it establishes a connection and trust between parties. Hypnotic language techniques, such as pacing and mirroring, can be used to match the other party's language patterns, tone, and body language to create rapport. This creates a sense of familiarity and comfort, which can help to reduce resistance and create a more conducive negotiation environment. 2. Using embedded commands. Embedded commands are hidden suggestions embedded within ordinary language that can bypass the conscious mind and influence the subconscious mind. They can be used to guide the other party's thinking and behavior without triggering resistance. For example, using phrases such as "you might consider," "you may find," or "you could think about" can plant suggestions in the other party's mind and influence their perspective without sounding forceful or directive. 3. Utilizing presuppositions. Presuppositions are statements that presuppose the truth of a certain condition or situation. They can be used to assume a particular outcome or behavior from the other party, which can influence their perception and response. For example, using phrases such as "when you accept this proposal, assuming we can find a solution," or "once we agree on the terms," can create an expectation in the other party's mind and shape their response accordingly. 4. Using metaphors and stories. Metaphors and stories are powerful tools in communication that can be used to bypass resistance and convey messages in a non-confrontational way. By using metaphors or sharing stories that are relatable to the other party's situation, negotiators can indirectly influence their perspective and response without triggering resistance. Metaphors and stories engage the subconscious mind and can create a shift in the other party's thinking without overtly pushing an agenda. 5. Employing future pacing. Future pacing is a technique that involves painting a positive picture of the future outcome or benefits of a particular agreement or decision. By describing the positive outcomes that the other party can expect in the future, negotiators can create a sense of motivation and anticipation, which can help to overcome resistance and gain buy-in. Future pacing can tap into the other party's emotions and desires, creating a compelling vision that can influence their decision-making. In conclusion, hypnotic language can be a valuable tool in handling and overcoming resistance in negotiation. By employing techniques such as building rapport, using embedded commands, utilizing presuppositions, using metaphors and stories, and employing future pacing, negotiators can subtly influence the other party's emotions, perceptions, and responses. It is important to note that ethical use of hypnotic language in negotiation requires transparency, respect for the other party's autonomy, and adherence to ethical guidelines. When used effectively and ethically, hypnotic language can be a powerful tool in navigating through resistance and achieving successful negotiation outcomes. Title: The Negotiation Game, a 1920s mobster story. In the roaring 1920s, the city was ruled by mobsters and gangsters. Among them, two notorious figures stood out: Jimmy the Shark Malone, a cunning and ruthless mob boss, and Frankie the Smooth Operator Valentine, a suave and charming negotiator who worked for a rival gang. Jimmy Malone had his eyes set on expanding his empire and taking over Frankie Valentine's territory. However, Frankie was not willing to give up without a fight. He knew that negotiating with someone as cunning and manipulative as Jimmy would require more than just traditional negotiation skills. He decided to use hypnotic language to handle and overcome Jimmy's resistance. Frankie invited Jimmy to a secret meeting in a dimly lit speakeasy. As they sat across from each other, Frankie began employing his hypnotic language skills. He started by building rapport, matching Jimmy's tone and body language. He then used embedded commands subtly, slipping in phrases like "you might consider" and "you may find." Frankie also utilized presuppositions, stating "assuming we can find a solution," and "once we agree on the terms." to create an expectation of cooperation in Jimmy's mind. He shared metaphors and stories that were relatable to Jimmy's situation, engaging his subconscious mind and influencing his perspective. As the negotiation progressed, Jimmy found himself captivated by Frankie's smooth and hypnotic language. He felt a shift in his perception and became more open to Frankie's proposals. Frankie also employed future pacing, describing a bright and profitable future for both of them if they could reach an agreement. Despite Jimmy's initial resistance, Frankie's hypnotic language skills gradually wore down his defenses. He found himself mesmerized by Frankie's words and visions of a prosperous future. Before he knew it, he was nodding in agreement, willing to compromise and make concessions. In the end, Frankie and Jimmy reached a mutually beneficial agreement, much to the surprise of their respective gangs. Frankie's skillful use of hypnotic language had successfully handled and overcome Jimmy's resistance, resulting in a favorable outcome for both parties. As the speakeasy emptied, and Frankie and Jimmy departed ways, Jimmy couldn't help but acknowledge Frankie's mastery in negotiation. Spending time with Frankie was always rewarding, as he had a way of using hypnotic language to influence and persuade, leaving a lasting impact on anyone he dealt with. From that day on, Frankie's reputation as the smooth operator grew, and he became a legend in the mobster world for his unparalleled negotiation skills. He had mastered the art of handling and overcoming resistance using hypnotic language, a skill that gave him an edge in the cutthroat world of 1920s mobsters, providing strategies and tactics for diffusing objections and turning resistance into cooperation. Negotiations can often be challenging, with counterparts expressing objections and resistance that can hinder progress. As a skilled negotiator, it is essential to have strategies and tactics in place to diffuse objections and turn resistance into cooperation. Here are some effective approaches. 1. Active listening. One of the most powerful strategies in negotiation is active listening. By actively listening to your counterpart's objections and concerns, you show empathy and understanding. This creates a conducive environment for finding common ground and addressing the underlying issues. 2. Acknowledging objections. Rather than dismissing objections, acknowledge them and show respect for your counterpart's perspective. By validating their concerns, you can establish trust and rapport, which can help in diffusing resistance. 3. Asking open-ended questions. Asking open-ended questions encourages your counterpart to share more information and provides you with insights into their concerns. It also allows you to guide the conversation in a positive direction and uncover potential solutions. 4. Offering alternatives. Instead of focusing solely on your own proposals, consider offering alternative options that address your counterpart's objections. This shows flexibility and a willingness to find mutually beneficial solutions, which can lead to cooperation. 5. Building on common ground. Identify areas of agreement or shared interests and build on them. By emphasizing common ground, you can create a positive momentum and shift the focus away from objections and resistance. 6. Finding win-win solutions. Adopt a collaborative mindset and aim for win-win solutions that benefit both parties. This approach shows a willingness to work together and find mutually beneficial outcomes, which can help in turning resistance into cooperation. 7. Using hypnotic language. Utilize hypnotic language techniques, such as embedded commands, presuppositions, and metaphors, to influence your counterpart's perception and shift their resistance into a more cooperative mindset. 8. Managing emotions. Emotions can often fuel resistance and objections. Therefore, it's crucial to manage your own emotions and also address your counterpart's emotions with empathy and understanding. By addressing emotions, you can diffuse objections and create a more cooperative environment. 9. Flexibility and creativity. Be open to flexibility and creativity in your approach. Consider alternative solutions, be willing to adjust your proposals, and find creative ways to address objections. This shows adaptability and a problem-solving mindset. 10. Building trust. Trust is a critical factor in negotiations. Build trust with your counterpart by being transparent, keeping your promises, and demonstrating integrity. Trust can help in overcoming resistance and fostering cooperation. In conclusion, diffusing objections and turning resistance into cooperation requires a combination of active listening, empathy, flexibility, creativity, and effective communication skills. By employing these strategies and tactics, you can navigate objections and resistance in negotiations and achieve mutually beneficial outcomes. Title: The Negotiation Game. It was the height of the 1920s Prohibition era, and the mobsters in the city were vying for control over the lucrative bootlegging trade. Two prominent figures in the underground world, Tony the Bulldog and Joey the Snake, found themselves at odds over a shipment of illegal liquor. Tony, a tough-talking and imposing figure, was known for his aggressive tactics and straightforward approach in negotiations. On the other hand, Joey, a smooth-talking and cunning character, was known for his charm and ability to diffuse objections with ease. Tony and Joey had a history of rivalry, and their negotiations often turned into heated arguments. This time was no different. Tony was determined to get the upper hand in the negotiation and secure the entire shipment for himself. Joey, however, was equally determined to protect his interests and not back down easily. As the two met in a dimly lit speakeasy to discuss the matter, tensions were high. Tony started off with his usual blunt approach, trying to strong-arm Joey into giving in to his demands. However, Joey remained calm and composed, using his charm and smooth talking to diffuse Tony's objections and resistance. Joey employed various strategies and tactics to turn the negotiation in his favor. He actively listened to Tony's concerns, acknowledging them and showing empathy. He asked open-ended questions to understand Tony's perspective better and offered alternative solutions that addressed Tony's objections. He built on common ground, highlighting their shared interest in the profitability of the bootlegging trade. Joey also used hypnotic language techniques to influence Tony's perception and shift his resistance into cooperation. He embedded commands subtly in his language, used presuppositions to guide the conversation, and weaved in metaphors that resonated with Tony's mindset. Tony, initially resistant to Joey's approach, started to soften as the negotiation progressed. He found himself drawn to Joey's charismatic persona and intrigued by his creative solutions. Joey's ability to manage emotions, stay flexible, and maintain a problem-solving mindset impressed Tony. As the negotiation continued, Joey's strategies began to pay off. Tony's objections and resistance gradually diffused, and he started to see the benefits of working together with Joey. With Joey's tactful negotiation skills, they arrived at a win-win solution that satisfied both parties. Tony and Joey agreed to share the shipment and collaborate on future bootlegging ventures, realizing that cooperation was more profitable than conflict. In the end, Tony and Joey walked out of the speakeasy as unlikely allies, having turned their initial resistance into cooperation through effective negotiation strategies. Their mutual respect for each other's skills and the ability to diffuse objections and find common ground had brought about a favorable outcome for both in the competitive world of 1920s mobsters. The story of Tony and Joey became legendary in the underground circles of the city, with many aspiring mobsters seeking to learn from their negotiation prowess. It was a testament to the power of strategies and tactics in diffusing objections and turning resistance into cooperation, even in the high-stakes world of mobsters during the Prohibition era.